Welcome to Issues. And as you know, Issues is a show that deals with community topics. Today we're going to deal with a topic that I'm sure is in our community, the topic of marriage. With us, our first guests are individuals who are marriage experts. They actually give marriage seminars, where Dr. Medley and his wife, India Medley. My first question, and it's for both of you. I'd like you to give the first part and then Tony the second part. What are two of the most important ingredients for a successful marriage?
Thank you, Richard. I'd have to say first and foremost communication. Speaking clearly and saying what you mean and meaning what you say. Not making assumptions, even though sometimes you feel you can safely make assumptions, but it's best not to when you're not sure.
Let me ask you, India, the individuals come into a marriage knowing how to communicate. Do they all the time?
No,
Yeah, okay.
No, we think we do. I mean, we've been married for 30 wonderful years, and I'm sure 30 years ago I felt that I was a very good communicator, and I learned that I'm really not. I learned that I thought that Tony should be able to read my mind, and that he doesn't, and that's not fair for me to assume that he can read my mind. I have to be clear about how I feel, and to be fair and kind about how I say it, and really be true to my words.
Okay, so
and thoughts.
One of the most important ingredients then in a marriage is communication.
Communication, and you never stop learning how to communicate. We are not experts at communicating. We're still learning.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Tony.
Well, I can give a quick answer and say agreeing with my wife in a second, but I would say compromise. Not only must you learn to communicate, the art of communicating, the art of listening, the art of timing when communication matters most. There are ways that you communicate best with your spouse. But marriage is also about compromise, the ability to love, to negotiate, to work together, to realize you can't just have it your way, that there is an equal partner in this relationship who may have a totally different view than your view. And when you communicate effectively, when you listen correctly, then the ability to compromise is not a win-loss issue. It's what's the best for the relationship. So individuals must learn how to compromise to the point where I esteem you enough to value your position more than mine, or to understand your position more than mine. And often that tug of war creates more conflict than anything else in relationships.
Yes, as you talked about compromise, if the couple cannot agree, is there sometimes a right and wrong answer where there really cannot be a compromise, or is there always a compromise solution?
I struggle with the notion of right and wrong answer, because that's not the issue. It's not a win or loss issue at all in relationships. Normally you hit the issue of conflict, which creates a whole nother dynamic for how do you resolve conflict. But compromise is really the ability to hear where the other person is coming from their head and from their heart. Normally we listen to words and we don't listen to the heart. The ability to compromise says that I'm willing to put aside my faulty approaches to communication, my idiosyncrasies in communication, how I deal with conflict, and I love you enough to honestly to hear, to get into your world, to know where you stand on things. So that's not, we use the word compromise as though we're giving up principle. It's not a surrender of principle, it's a surrender of doing things my way and learning the best way, the best what's good for the relationship.
Okay, and I like what you said. Many times as husband and wives, we are listening to words when we should be listening to the heart.
That's correct, that's correct.
Now, in this modern era of 2014, is the husband still considered the head of the house, or is it more, or should it be more of a shared partnership? Let me go to the wife first.
I was hoping you were going to go to Tony first, because I have a packed answer for that. But my response is, yes, I believe in what the Bible says the man's role is the priest, the head of the home. I also see the wife's role as the neck. If the man is the head, the wife is the neck.
Yeah, let me throw something in here, India.
Because we turn the head.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I won't ask my question then.
You see,
Yes.
I mean, seriously, I mean, we really influence the head.
Yes.
You think about the neck. The neck, you know, makes a direction, points it in a direction,
Yes.
it turns, it nods in approval, it disapproves.
Yes.
We should not belittle the woman's role in the family at all. I mean, biblically, God has given women profound influence and responsibility, which is extremely positive. We don't have to worry about who's in control, really, if we really think about what God has given us as a gift, our power of influence and intuition. And that, I think, is most significant than who's in control and who's in charge.
Tony, I listened to your wife's answer, where the men are the head, but the woman is the neck. And in her explanation, she said the neck turns the head. A lot of things could come out of that. It seems like the neck might be in control. But what is your answer?
Well, we can continue with that because body parts mean every part is significant. If I'm going to look from a biblical perspective, if I'm going to Ephesians, then there's a call for husbands who are called to be the head, okay, to love your wife as Christ loved the church. So what does that headship mean in terms of you compare it with Christ? The husbands are the first to sacrifice, the first to give their all, the first to go out of the way for the good of their wife. And also Ephesians says that husbands love themselves like their own bodies, that if you love your body, you will love your spouse. So how I love, how I respect my spouse says a whole lot to how I treat myself and what I think about myself. So headship is not an authoritarian position. Headship is I lead in love, I lead in sacrifice, I lead in surrender, I lead in forgiveness, I lead in acceptance. That's the biblical model of headship that men are called to follow.
Let me ask you, realistically, as we look at society today, do we really, can we find, or do we find that in many households the husband is really the head, or maybe the wife is really the head, and there's not that shared partnership as there should be? So as we understand the biblical model, and we hear what both of you are saying, but is that really what's taking place in many homes today? Is that biblical model taking place in many homes today?
Statistics makes it clear, no, it is not. Not even in Christian homes. We know we have at least a 50% divorce rate. And what happens, I believe, is that sometimes the baggage that couples bring to marriage, they either come with unrealistic expectations, or they don't deal with those expectations well enough when they come into the relationships. They don't understand temperaments, they don't understand the dynamics of how they were raised or the experiences they've gone through, and they sometimes think that marriage is going to fix things as opposed to exposing the real nature of the person. So that's why it's critically important to understand the dynamics even before you enter into the relationships.
I don't know if some of you caught what Tony or Dr. Medley said. Marriage doesn't really fix things, it exposes
That's
things.
correct.
Wow, that really is interesting. I see time running, so let me hop on to another question. We often hear the adage, opposites attract. Is there any truth in that?
Well, let me say yes. There's nothing more opposite than male and female, and praise God for opposites. But I think it's a combination of not only opposites that attract, there are common things that also attract. I'm attracted to my wife because of how she looks. I fell in love with her years ago. But we also have...
And by the way, these two met each other while they were still in high school.
That's correct. That's correct.
Met and dated.
Met and dated.
So,
yeah.
But there were also common things that we had in common. So, men are from Mars and women are from Venus. There's some truth to that, but we're also from Earth.
Yeah.
So we also got to find the commonality So it's out of the commonality and the differences that the mystery and the miracle that blends and brings a relationship together helps it to flourish. So yes, opposites should attract, but there's also some commonality within the opposites.
You know, much of what you're saying, and we're dealing with marriage, but how does somebody, and we learn from marriage, but there's certain things we need to know before marriage. And I know, Tony, you do marriage counseling. So what are you looking for to know if these two people, if they're ready for marriage?
I value premarital counseling, and I think anyone who is serious in relationships ought to participate in it. But even before the premarital counseling, there are habits that are established in dating that also provide the platform to what type of person this is going to be if you choose to marry them. So, a number of issues constantly come up. We could speak about a number of them, but issues of lateness, issues of, for instance, for students, if you have a student who is a diligent student who is serious about their work and someone who is slothful and doing nothing, but you just love them, well, there's some red flags going up. And often we ignore the red flags, assuming through the infatuation, through the love, that if I stay with them, if I love them enough, I can love them to change. And again, you won't love them to change. They're telling you who they are. They're telling you that they don't like to work, they don't like to study. Saying I do will not change the character. It only reveals the character.
Yes. Yeah. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, I was going to say, we don't get married to change people.
Yeah.
You have to recognize, respect, and love the person for who they are. Now, we grow, but you grow together. You're not growing.
Can couples grow apart, India?
Yes, they can. If they make a decision that they don't want to make this thing work out, yes, they can grow apart, but it has to be a conscious decision. And then you have to ask yourself, why? Why don't I want this any longer?
Wow.
Tony,
both of you, should husband and wives, should there be secrets between husband and wives? You first, and then India.
Well, the short answer is no. But let's classify secrets.
Yes.
Secrets that are detrimental to the relationships, no. Should not be secrets.
How do you determine secrets that are detrimental to the relationship?
Alternate, separate lifestyles. Stepping out of the covenant and commitment of marriage, to live in a lifestyle contrary to what you agreed, what you covenant to live. When you go against any of those principles and maintain that lifestyle, a secret life, a dual life, not only outside of God's will, but also out of the norms of society, and the norms of relationships, and the norms of the covenant relationships, those secrets, be it addictions, be it affairs, be it embezzlement of funds, resources that undermine the family, none of those things should be practiced or kept from the spouse. But if the secrets are of such that it's timing, for instance, that someone got a diagnosis about an illness while the spouse is going through a critical time, then that may be a short term, this is not the best time to communicate that information to my spouse. So I'm holding this only for a season, so I can share it when they can receive it the best. Or if it's a surprise, I'm trying to surprise my spouse with something. So I'm holding a secret for the good of them. So, we have to first, for me, we got to classify what do you mean by secrets. But that's kind of an umbrella of secrets that I normally deal with. You, India?
Well, I agree 100% with what Tony says, and I'll just briefly add that anything that we could hold from our spouse that would show disrespect to him or her, and then if other people know, and then it's withheld from your husband or your wife, that's really not showing respect and love towards your spouse. So you have to be very careful about that, making sure that you are maintaining a level of integrity and trust within your relationship.
Go ahead.
A critical issue that I also like to speak of is health issues. That when you withhold, for instance, in premarital counseling, one of the things I insist upon is that the couple get physicals, because sometimes there are health secrets that are withheld from the other person. And it's not fair to go into a relationship when there are health issues that you didn't know anything about, that again impact the relationship, from childbearing to diseases that the individual may have, or how they may influence the spouse or the children, from diabetes or other issues. You need to know as much about your spouse as you possibly can before you get married, because it's going to impact you in the long run.
Key point. Very good. We've been talking with Dr. Medley and his wife, India, and as you listen to their answers, you might have picked up that much of it they based on the Bible. Dr. Medley is a pastor of one of the largest Seventh-day Adventist church there in Maryland. So we're very, very happy that both of you can be here. We thank you for the information that you've shared with us on marriage. And as I said earlier, they do have marriage seminars, and if you would like them to come back to Bermuda and maybe have a marriage seminar with your church or with your organization, you can get in touch with them through contacting issues. So Tony and India, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
We will be right back, and we'll be talking to my daughter and her husband. We'll see how much of this they have been putting into practice. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're going to continue our conversation and our discussion on marriage. We met Dr. Medley and his wife earlier, and now we're going to talk with Rishee and Bryan Paschal. Rishee is my daughter, and Bryan is her husband, and they have been married 8 months. One of the aspects of marriage we're going to look at after the engagement. How does one prepare for the wedding? After the engagement, how does one prepare for the wedding? Rishee and Bryan, after the engagement, how was the date of your wedding decided on? Bryan?
Well, when I initially proposed, which was January 10th, 2013, we wanted to pick a date that would give us enough time to plan the wedding within that same year. So we chose the date November 10th because we didn't want it to interfere with the major holidays such as Thanksgiving and Christmas. So that's how we chose that date.
Interesting. What role did you play in the choosing of the date, Rishee?
I want to say that my role was a very strong and adamant role. I did not want to wait a long time. My thought process was, well, I'm engaged. He knew what he was doing when he proposed, so let's not take time, years planning a wedding. So that very next day, he proposed on a Saturday night. That Sunday, I literally spent my whole work time on the phone with my mother trying to come up with a good date that would work best for both families, because obviously I had family coming from Bermuda and Bryan had his family coming from Alabama. So we tried to pick a date.
Bryan and Rishee, they live in Orlando. Rishee was born in Bermuda, but right now she has chosen to live in Orlando. Okay. Now, by the way, one of the things I'm finding out about wedding is it seems to me that there are many, many things that cost money that are really not needed. Now, you hired a wedding planner. Why was a wedding planner really needed? Who wants to address that?
We chose a wedding planner because we thought that that would be the best option in terms of keeping everything in the budget, as well as finding the proper help that we would need without causing ourselves stress. So we went that route.
Yes.
I would say that we chose a wedding planner because I was working full time. I also was in the process of going into my internship at school, so I did not have the time needed to plan a wedding, find this, find that, go here, go there. So it was very important to me to get that plan because I know that I did not have the time to sit down and plan everything out and do, especially all the research needed that went into a wedding to do that in a timely manner for our wedding date. In addition to that, I don't know anything about weddings. This is my first and last marriage, so I don't know what to ask. I don't know. All I know is what I want, not how to go about getting it and asking for it in the research round.
Nothing against wedding planners, but I can remember when I got married, I don't even know if there was something called a wedding planner around. So I don't know if weddings really need a wedding planner. But now, how did you decide on the number of guests?
We determined the number of guests basically by the figure that our parents gave us in terms of the budget. We knew that we didn't want an excessive amount of guests. We wanted sort of an intimate wedding, so that's pretty much how I determined, you know, how many guests we wanted.
Let me follow up with a question to you, Bryan. Do you feel that the role that you played in planning the wedding, do you feel that you received enough information?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. How did you share information with, not necessarily how, but did you share, did Bryan participate in the major decisions of the wedding?
The major decisions, yes. Initially, when we got engaged, we sat down, and he didn't want to be involved in the bridesmaids' dresses or the flowers and things of that nature. So we sat down together and said, these are the things that you have to come to, or the things that you'll be in charge of. So that included the DJ, the food tasting, not necessarily the venue because we had already agreed on that in regards to the ceremony, but the reception venue and things of that nature. So when it came to food, when it came to the DJ, when it came to the reception venue, he was actively going to those meetings with me.
Okay. Now, as both of you stood there before the minister, what was going through your head? And we're going to show a couple pictures while you talk. So what was going through your head, Bryan, as you stood there in front of the minister?
I was just excited to be marrying the love of my life. I was just happy that that day had come, and I was also ready to get it over with at the same time because it's a long process to plan a wedding and things of that nature. And I was just excited to see everything come to fruition.
Rishee, what was going through your head?
At the very beginning, it was excitement. Towards the homily, it was, okay, my feet are starting to hurt. Does it show on my face? So those are my thoughts being up there with the ministers.
Now, you had 2 cakes. Many weddings don't have. Why 2 cakes necessary?
I think the 2 cakes were necessary to sort of show our different personalities. That was, I guess, the trend. That's the trend nowadays. So I think that's the reason for the 2 cakes. Maybe my wife may have a different reason.
My question is, why not 2 cakes? I guess my thought for the wedding was go big, go as big as possible. I had 3 outfits for the wedding. I had 2 cakes. So why not? This is the only wedding I'm going to have. So why not do it in the best way that shows both my husband's and I's personality and just goes as big as possible as our budgets will allow.
How did you come up with the budget for the wedding?
Actually, we didn't come up with the budget. Our parents came up with the budget. So that's basically what we had to go off of.
I know we started with the figure. I came up with my budget based off of my brother's wedding. So my brother's wedding cost X amount. I said, well, it's a new day and age. I'm going to need a little bit more than what he had to get what I want. So I would often ask you, Daddy, to let you know I need about $2,000 more than what my brother had.
Yes. Now that the wedding is about 8 months behind you, as you look, would you do anything differently, Rishee?
I would just be as specific as possible. After the wedding, when you're starting to get pictures and videos back, I would see that things that I relayed to the service providers was not exactly what I wanted. So I would be more specific and detailed, not just at the beginning when we're sitting down, but throughout the process to make sure that what I want or what I'm expecting is what we're actually getting.
Okay. Now, you said, Bryan, that in the engagement you wanted to get married within that year. Now, many people watching don't necessarily, once they get engaged, don't necessarily, you know, they might wait for the next year. Did you feel rushed? You were engaged in January and got married in November. Did you feel rushed? Because what you're saying, people might be listening to you and they're like, yeah, that's kind of fast. So did you feel rushed?
We didn't feel rushed at all. I think that was an ample amount of time to sort of get everything together and leading up to that day. But you have to look at your own personal situation and determine, you know, how much time is enough time for you and your spouse.
Okay. You did a lot of the planning. Did you feel that you had to really put extra time? You were still in school, so did you feel that it was impinging on your schoolwork?
No, to me it was kind of a relief. It was something that I wanted to do. It was something that excited me. So I would look forward to, oh, it's time to put out the save the dates. Yay, it's time to take our engagement pictures. Even more exciting. So the new events and goals that I set for my wedding were things that I looked forward to and kept me motivated in every other facet of my life.
Now, those of you parents who might have a daughter and looking forward to a wedding, save the date. Why? I mean, I can't recall when I was getting married, we sent something out, save the date, then the invitation. Why can't the invitation just be enough? Why you have to have save the date?
Because it's an important day. You want everyone to remember and keep them reminded of your special day and what's to come. So you don't want them getting the invitation and then saying, oh, tickets, money, expenses. So save the date is kind of the medium to start preparing and looking for tickets and being active and making your way to the wedding.
Okay, we've been discussing marriage. Earlier in the program, you heard again Dr. Medley and his wife looking and talking about some of the ingredients of a marriage. We've been here talking with Rishee and Bryan Paschal, and they've been telling us how they planned their wedding from the engagement to the wedding. Hopefully, as you listened, you gained information that can be helpful to you in your wedding. Again, we thank you so much for joining us on Issues, and we look forward for you joining us again next time.